Do you want to see how you can make a swirling ice vortex in less than 5 minutes? Sure, we all do. Okay, so this little thing here is just a base for a little character that I had sculpted and wanted to have him kind of flying out of like this little icy vortex thing. Now for the record, this could also be a fiery vortex. This could also just be a run-of-the-mill moldy vortex, or it can be made of wood for all I know. All I'm saying is a little swirly vortex, a little thing sticking out, it can be kind of a tedious thing to do, but there's a really cool way to do it, at least based on what I was playing around with. I wanted to have a base and I wanted to make it really fast. So I tried to find the fastest way to make this, and I did it using basically a Helix and some Nanomesh. So I just want to show you what I did in case this is helpful, in case you have a vortex of your very own that you would really love to have and want to spend about 5 minutes doing it. Here's one way to do it. Let's give it a shot. So I'm going to come here to a brand new scene just because I want to have this little dude out of my face, and I'm going to start with anything because it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to be making anything out of this actual object here. I'm going to be using basically a Helix as the overall kind of topology of the vortex, and then I'll replace some of those faces with a shape that will kind of, when Dynameshed together, look like that kind of like swirly vortexy thing. So first of all, I'm going to come over here to my little tool palette here. I'm going to choose a Helix 3D. This is, you know, just a swirly thing that we're going to initialize quite a bit to kind of make it look more kind of like almost like a funnel, right? So I'll come over here to initialize, and right now the radius is going from narrow to wide to narrow, and I want this to go from narrow to wide. So I want to kind of widen the bottom here, and then have this kind of, actually I want to narrow the base, you see, and then have this get a little bit wider like so. And obviously I don't want to have it be quite so tall. So I'm going to go to coverage and knock down the number of swirls, maybe like 4 for this. Let's say 4. And let's see what else we can do. Let's go to profile. We'll make this a little bit wider, so it's a little bit thicker. And I think vertically, I think we can change that. Yes, by going to the what is this thing? The offset. So I'm gonna kind of crank that down a little bit more to have it more kind of like settled together. Keep in mind, I have no idea half the time what these things do. I just kind of play around until I figure it out. And that should be all right. Maybe I'll turn the profile down now that we have, you know, kind of more of a nice secure thing. And now I want to go to my divides because this has 16 divisions going around here, right? I want to turn that down a little bit. I want to have fewer, maybe something like this. Okay, so again, I'm going to tone down the L divide just a little bit, just to have these be a little more uniform in terms of the overall shape. I'm hoping this works. Again, this is going to be the idea here anyway. I'm going to increase the coverage just a little bit, like that. Okay, so this is probably okay. So now I'll come up here and choose Make Polymesh 3D, so it's actually a thing that I can work with. And now what I want to do is I want to kind of determine where I want to have the actual like vortexy, sticky out things. It's a technical term, don't worry about this. You know, you have to be a true artist to understand that. So first thing I want to do is I want to make the thing that I'm going to put on here. Okay, I want to figure out what it is I'm going to kind of like smack on each of these little faces here to get this to work. Looking at it, I might have done better off if I had just kind of like maybe increased my S divide a little, my L divide a little bit more. So I'm going to increase it a little bit, then make it polymesh because I want to have a few more there. So what am I going to do with this? I need to have something to kind of put on these little faces that's going to kind of be more vortexy and kind of stormy looking, that we can kind of like get some tendrils sticking out, right? And I want to use basically this shape that's quick and easy. So I'm going to actually make another shape. I'm going to come up here and grab this gear. Okay, and this gear is very, very high res, and it's still, again, it's initialized right now. It's not initialized yet, so I can kind of I can turn the subdivisions down a little bit, make this a little less heavy in terms of the overall point count, right? It doesn't need to be nearly so crazy in that sense. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm gonna come up here to my little tool palette, initialize it, and now I'm just going to make this kind of like kind of long and thin, kind of like this, just some kind of somewhat more like, you know, lengthy thing. And I'm going to actually look at this from the top and make this go forward like this. So this is my shape for now. Okay, and I want to turn this into a Nanomesh object, which is something, by the way, I always forget how to do. So if I screw up here, you know, it's just because I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm going to go to an insert mesh brush. It doesn't really matter, I don't think, what the insert mesh brush is. I always tend to use this IMM basic because it's a brush that I'll probably never use. And I'm going to put this, make this a brush here. So if I go to brush, I think if I go to create and go to create Nanomesh brush, now you'll see here there's a brush called ZBrush with 8 next to it. This is my Nanomesh brush, okay? Now, I need to actually have this be part of that brush, so I have to go to brush and choose from mesh. So now my little gear is part of my Nanomesh brush, right? So that's all I needed really this for, I think, is to kind of put that in here as something that can be utilized as a Nanomesh object. And Nanomesh, if you're not sure about what Nanomesh is, it basically is something where you can kind of replace each face with an object. So it's great for like scales and stuff like that. So now what I want to do is I want to have each of these little faces be one of those little gears. So that way I can kind of like have them all kind of like overlapping a little bit and then do kind of a Dynamesh thing to kind of bring them all together. I'm going to actually go back here and just do a little more. I'm going to go to 12 maybe, something like that. Well, you know, I'll stick with 11, what the heck. I'll go to 12. Again, I'm just second guessing myself, but that's okay. So now I have this set up. I want to kind of figure out where to put these because I don't need to go. I don't need them to go everywhere. So I'm going to kind of use ZBrush here. And the ZBrush brush is B. You know, go to B and then Z, and then you can get the ZBrush, which is the M key. By the way, my pen is like acting weird. I don't know if it's my pen or the new version of ZBrush. We'll have to see. But what I want to do is I want to kind of choose a couple rows, basically, of these faces to replace with that Nanomesh object. So I'm going to go here to my ZBrush, hold down the space bar and choose over a face. Make sure it's over a face. I'm going to choose polygroup, polyloop. So hover over here and make sure the little orange line is pointing down this group. I'll just tap on there to make a polygroup out of it. And that's pretty much what I want. So I'm going to hold down Control and Shift and tap on this to isolate it. Okay, and I just want these. I might want to get one more row here. But before I do, I just want to get rid of these little end cap parts. So I'm just going to hold down the Alt key and just tap on those two to select them. Alt tap on those two. Alt tap on those two to select them, and then hover over a face. Go to delete a single poly. It'll still delete all the ones you've selected. So now we're good. And now I'm just going to increase my selection. So I'll just go to visibility. There's a shortcut for this, but you can go to visibility. Just choose grow. Now it's going to grow it by one row in either case. And now I'm just going to make a polygroup out of this row here. So polygroup, polyloop. Select that row. Actually, let's just hit Control W first to make that all one thing, and then do that. Polygroup that, and then Control Shift tap on that to make it go away. This is all I want. I want these 3 rows right here. It's a long-winded way of just making 3 rows the only stuff that I can see. I'll go here to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. So now it's just this. So now I have just these little faces, and these are the faces that I want to turn into a Nanomesh object. All right. So I'm going to come over here to Geometry. Actually, not Geometry, to Nanomesh. I'm going to go to my brush palette here and choose that ZBrush 9 brush, the one with the little gear, and make sure my gear is activated, I think. And I'm going to hover over a face and hold down the space bar and change, go to Insert Nanomesh, I guess Polygroup All, I think should do. If I tap and drag now, you can see I'm getting a gear attached to all of these. You see. Now, the angle is wrong, and I'm going to fix that over here in the Nanomesh menu. So let's go here to my rotation, which is going to be X rotation maybe? Nope. By the way, there's going to be an option for me to choose one or the other. I will always choose wrong. Let's try X rotation to kind of do that. I want this to kind of follow with the faces. And again, the orientation of the gear when you first add it to the brush, if I had it in the proper orientation, I wouldn't have to worry about this. But of course, you know, I guessed wrong, and that's just how things go. So I want that to be like that. I want this to kind of be a little bit more like so. There you go. So I'm looking for basically a variation of this where this is kind of sticking up like this. I'm going to go to my scale, my size, and kind of scale those up a little bit. That way I get a little bit more bang for my buck here. How about width? Let's go to my width and kind of crank that up a little bit as well. You can see here I'm getting kind of like this nice little like just jagged thing, which is kind of a cool looking thing in its own right. I can kind of increase the length a little bit. Again, remember, depending on what it thinks the axes are, you might be better off going width or height, right, to get what you want. Okay, so you have this nice uniform thing happening here, and again, obviously, when you change the rotations and the variations and so forth, I can change what the width variations are, the length variations, and just get a little bit more randomization in here. You can even do some offset variations, so you can kind of like have some of these be like higher up or lower in terms of like where they are relative to the vortex. And this is the kind of thing that I would just experiment with quite a bit, right? So you can increase the size a little bit or decrease the size, play around with the width and the height variation. Generally speaking, something like this is really going to only work very well if you have the orientation the way you like it, because you're going to get some of the, you know, these little gear parts flying up in different areas. And once you kind of have this looking kind of the way you want it, then I'm going to pretty much just Dynamesh this whole thing together so it has kind of a more solid feel. And again, right now I think probably there's a lot of space in here, which might not be a bad thing, because it might actually just kind of give us more, you know, more bumps essentially in that setup there. So, but this little Y variation here, this Y rotation, I should say, is doing some pretty cool work too, right? Because it's kind of like making this vortex fly out in different directions, getting some really cool effects here. Again, this is done very quickly here. You want to kind of do a lot of trial and error, but let's say we like this, right? I kind of think it's kind of cool. I'm going to come over here to my inventory, which is the bottom menu in Nanomesh, and choose one to mesh. It's going to kind of make this into an actual object. If I hit Shift F to see my polyframe, you can see what I have to work with. Now, this little ribbon that we used as the basis is no longer needed. And if I want to Dynamesh this little strip here might cause some issues. So I'm going to Control Shift Tap on that to isolate, to make it go away, and then come over here to my geometry, modify topology, delete hidden, and that now it's gone, right? Now, this obviously is not looking quite like a vortex yet. It needs to kind of feel more like a solid piece, at least in my case. So before I do anything else, I am going to Dynamesh this together, but I might want to come in here and just like run a little inflate just to kind of soak up, kind of like fill up some of those little holes in the gear. So I'll just go to my Inflate Brush. You can go here to your deformation palette over here on the right hand side and try to do it kind of an inflate that way too, just to kind of get some of those holes to close up. Or you can kind of come in here and just do it more of an isolated, you know, targeted area where you want to have those little holes to kind of be less prominent, right? But you can see you can get some pretty cool effects here, and you can try things with deformation too. Again, there's noise and those kind of things to kind of see what you can get to kind of make this look a little bit more weird. I'm not going to worry about that right now. What I want to do right now is make this into a solid piece, and I'm just going to do that using Dynamesh. And again, I have my little customized UI. I have some Dynamesh stuff up here, but it's under your Geometry tab under Dynamesh. Now, remember, the resolution slider is going to determine basically how many points are retained when it rebuilds this mesh. And the default setting is 128. That's probably not going to give us, you know, enough points to keep our shape recognizable. We have almost 300,000 points here. 128 might not get that for you. Let's give that a shot. So I'll turn Dynamesh on, and you can see it doesn't really. It's like really, really blocky and looks really, really bad. So I'm going to undo that and just double that, maybe down 250 or so. Dynamesh it again, and that looks a little better. One of the things that I think I did when I did this was I also turned on polish. Right next to Dynamesh, you have a button called polish, and that will kind of apply that clay polish to this when you Dynamesh it. So now I'll increase the Dynamesh like 300 or so, and then Dynamesh it, and now it makes, I think it looks a little bit better, right? We have this kind of neat little setup here. And again, I didn't go through and inflate all these before I went and did that, and you totally could still do that. I mean, you can go here to deformation right now and do a little more inflating. I probably should have just made that hole a little less prominent before I even did Nanomesh in the first place, but you know, not inflate balloon, definitely not inflate balloon for this. But you can come in here again with your Inflate Brush. You can kind of like tweak these if you need to, and then just Control Tap and drag to re-Dynamesh it. But pretty quickly, you can see you can get something that feels vortexy. Like I said, this was a kind of a quick version of it. I probably would have randomized the rotations a little bit more so that it didn't feel quite so uniform. But this is just a quick way, essentially, to to get that shape set up. Then you can come in here with a brush and just do whatever you want, right? You kind of just change this into whatever shape you want. But it just is a nice little quick way, I think, to get in there and get some interesting shapes going on here. And don't forget, of course, you can use deformers on here. You can try twisting this and kind of getting a nice little vortex effect that way, right? Don't forget, deformers are awesome in that regard. You can do some really cool stuff like this. Twist it some more, right? And then you can kind of just play around with this. But what I did to make my little vortex there, not saying it's a smashing success or anything like that, but it's just a quick way to get a shape that has a lot of kind of surface detail on it without a whole lot of work. Nanomesh is pretty great for that.